Hey there, my Chemo Kitchen friends. It's Bob Prince, and this is the Chemo Kitchen Podcast. It's a place where we talk about the very real issues in and around the cancer community. I've learned a few things and met some amazing people from all walks of life in my 21 years as a cancer survivor. So sit back and listen as I talk with members of this community and provide resources, insights, tools, and hopefully shed a little light to help you move through where you are in your cancer journey. Welcome to the Chemo Kitchen Podcast. I'm Bob Prince, your host, and I'm here with Jeff Boothman, the author of How to Be a Cancer Patient. Fantastic book, great read. I highly recommend it. I'm just going to read off the back cover, Jeff, because I couldn't write it any better myself here. I'll tell you a little bit about Jeff. Jeff is a leadership and operations expert, coach, and author. He was diagnosed with T Cell Lymphoma and survived after multiple surgeries, rounds of chemotherapy, radiation treatment, and other complications. Despite all of this, he faced his diagnosis and treatment with a determined and resilient mindset that helped him stay organized and recover with minimal stress. I wish this book was around 20 years ago when I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
Reading this, I realized just how helpful and how needed this instructional path to help you get through it. So yeah, let's dive right into it, Jeff.
It's a weird thing to me. I mean, it's like people get diagnosed with cancer. You're automatically pushed involuntarily into probably one of the biggest challenges of your life, right? And a big part of that is a mental challenge. And you get no coaching on that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was, hey, you're diagnosed with T Cell Lymphoma and your next treatment is whatever. And that to me is crazy. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I remember because of course, and our listeners who have gone through this understand this very well. That moment when you hear about your diagnosis is kind of, it's laser etched.
Yeah.
You don't forget
right,
that,
of course.
right?
Yep.
And then you go through the rounds of some testing to get you a little further along, and then they present you with a treatment plan, and it's however many pages long, and here's your schedule.
Yeah. That's it.
And that's it, right?
Yeah. That's crazy.
It is.
Yeah, it is. And I knew for me anyhow. So I went in. Mine was a little bit of a slow burn. So I had a tumor that they found, and they went in and they tried to go and take a sample of it to try and figure out exactly what it was. They weren't sure at the time. Mm-hmm. So I had one surgery. They did that. They couldn't figure it out pathology wise while I was under. So they just left it in place. And then they came back a couple weeks later, said, "Yeah, we need to go take it out."
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, there was a bunch of other things they had to sort out. And then I finally got the diagnosis. But, what struck me is I knew when I kind of got into the system, and I think a lot of people feel this way. So once you're diagnosed, you're just dumped into the system. So I was on a podcast with another medical doctor a while ago, and he likened it to a conveyor belt. Right, you're just put on this conveyor belt, and you go from station to station to station, right? And it's just like I knew when I was in the hospital day one for my first round of chemo that what I was doing and how I was acting was not productive.
Right.
I didn't know what to do in place of it, right? Mm-hmm. So me with my background, I've been operation kind of process person for the bulk of my professional career. I'm like, there just has to be a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And the analogy I give is like everybody I know that has kids, their kids played soccer when they were 3 or 4. Now think of all the instruction they got before they showed up to play their first game.
Of course.
Arguably, fighting cancer is immensely more difficult, but yet nothing. Yes, that's where the idea came from. I just knew I was not a good patient from the get-go, and there was a better way. So
And I mean, we lean into this with, I think, through the last couple of years, the talk about mental health and access to mental health care has become, a real hot button topic. And we realize, I know that we share this is from reading your book and your experience, is that there's very little offering
Yeah.
around mental health.
Yeah.
And even when I went through my last rounds of treatment in 2022, I asked to see an oncologist that's a psychological oncologist, and they who was supposed to be on staff, and they said, "Oh, he left, and we haven't replaced him."
Right.
All right,
Right.
so yeah,
Right.
where and the importance of that position, we understand what it is.
Yeah. It's a
Because
huge deal.
it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But most hospitals don't have that person,
right.
right? They'll have a social worker or a chaplain,
Mm-hmm.
right? So where do you fall, right? If
Yeah.
you tell them that you're in a huge mental health crisis, they'll send a social worker in there to help you sort it out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going through the struggles that are just normal for, every type of cancer patient, there's the help that you can get, right? And it's not like there's nothing out there,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's all really general. Oh, you should meditate. You should, talk to your doctor. And how do you act on that?
Right.
So my whole goal, and I'm, probably part of the way there. This is first go around on this whole idea, but what do you do exactly? Like, what exactly do you do? Right? Get a notebook, ask these questions, do this until you're comfortable, do this until you feel like you can advocate for yourself. And if you
Mm-hmm.
can't do, so it's hopefully at least one layer down from the general, be a good patient thing.
Right. As I said earlier, if I had this book, or or something like this was available in my first go around, it would have made it a lot easier for me, because yes, you do realize you need a notebook.
Yeah.
Everybody says get a notebook. Okay, get a notebook. But then what are the questions to ask? How you say you need to have, between advocating for yourself or
Yeah.
bring someone who can advocate for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's you go in there kind of you need the help. Maybe you have a friend, your loved one, a spouse,
Yeah.
a child that can come with you
Yeah.
to hear the things that you're not going to hear, because
Right.
it
Right. Either
it's
you're
easy to
fog,
get.
right? You
Yeah.
got brain fog, or it's
Yes.
just so much volume of information at once. You're just like, okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's and look, a lot of people aren't comfortable, for instance, advocating for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not. I mean,
Yeah.
challenging a doctor is something that's not anything most people are comfortable with. And
Right.
for me, I had no problem with it, not from a medical perspective. I don't have any background to say, look,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, your treatment plan isn't exactly right. But one of the examples I give is when I was getting ready to be pushed out into radiation after I was done with my chemo treatments, and the doctor, he's like, well, who do you want as your radiation doc? It's Dr. Smith, Dr. I didn't know any of them. So I just said, well, who's the smartest one? And
Mm-hmm.
my wife was with me, and she's like, oh, you can't ask that. I'm like, well, why not? Like, why not?
Why not?
It's the
Right.
ultimate form of advocating. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't mean or nasty about it, right? But that's really what I wanted. So it's like, okay, I was, comfortable enough to just say, look, this is what I want. But a lot of people aren't. And I think that's, even when it comes down to, hey, I'm cold, whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is, right?
Oh,
Food
sure.
doesn't taste good. There's a
Yeah.
million different things.
Yeah.
So
And that's why I just I can't recommend this book any more strongly, is because I'm experienced. I've had 5 recurrences,
yeah.
and you build this bank of experience. I'm a great
Right.
advocate for myself now,
Right. Of course.
and
Right.
have been for a while now,
Yeah.
especially after the first go around.
Yeah.
Um, you learn kind of how to work the system too, and what can work and what doesn't work.
For sure.
But if you're going in for the first time, this is a book that you really want to read. I just want to remind our listeners that we're with Jeff Boothman. Jeff wrote a book, How to Be a Cancer Patient, a fantastic read. If you're recently diagnosed, you or your caregiver, get this book and take a read. It is filled with great information. Oh, hey, Jeff, I want to talk a little bit just about the chapters of the book.
Sure.
Give people a brief overview because we want people to buy the book too. Tell us, I mean, in your words, why you wrote the book.
So for me, and it was mostly when I was in on the chemo side, I actually blogged, right? Because I knew, and I didn't really put two and two together at the time, but I knew a lot of people would be like, how's it going? And I didn't really want 25,000 phone calls and texts and whatever emails from people, right? So I just wrote down, what's going on. And, part of that, as you're writing that, you think through some things, right? And I think for me, where this whole thing came from was I was just frustrated. I knew what I was doing and how I was acting, especially the very first day I was in the hospital, was not productive, right? But I didn't really know what to do different. And as I went through, and probably much like you, it's a lot easier when you're kind of near the end to reflect back on what was helpful and what wasn't. So that was kind of the way that kind of the chapters got glued together. But in terms of the impetus for writing the book, it was just, I was frustrated and I was just like, man, there just has to be something out there. You go on Amazon, you can spend hours on Amazon. There's nothing that's really like that. The hospital, and I was one of the best cancer hospitals in the US, and they had all manner of material to help patients, right? But it wasn't very specific. So knowing that, I tried on purpose to be a good patient and couldn't do it because I didn't have the tools, and knowing that, there's a lot of other people like me, when you experience it, right? You're inpatient, walking around the halls, you see everything. And, certainly where you were, it was, I'm sure, enormously difficult to see some of the things that you saw, probably a lot of really acutely sick people. And I was pretty much the same way. I'm just like, and how, if you don't feel compassion in the want to try and help at that point, you're like, okay, really. And I really thought that, given my background and how I think about things and deconstruct things, I'm like, okay, well, I'll take a shot at it.
Yeah.
Right. If I help one person, that's a win.
Right. I see that, it's a way I think we're both in this category of trying to pull back the curtain a little bit to show people what it's like.
Yeah.
The last part of your book, well, not the last part, the recipes are the last part of your book, but you have the blog postings where you write through that one, and reading through those blog postings. I could relate so intimately to what your experience was, even with having family members come through, and that experience of like, all right, let's get the TV set up right. Oh, okay. Look, I can attach an HDMI cable to the TV and stream from my computer. Who knew? Of course. They didn't tell me, right? So, and yes, and walking those halls, as you say, getting up is so important.
Yeah, you have to move,
right?
Yeah, it's a big deal. Big deal.
And right.
Yeah, they just laughed at me. I would just do laps, 3 a.m, I'm wide awake from all the, steroids I'm on. And I was like, all right, I go for a walk, right?
Yes, right. So when in the beginning of the book, you talk about, the diagnoses and what you need to do. Would you talk a little bit about, because I think this was so helpful in the beginning, because there's so much happening.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get it was hard for me. I'll just speak about me. It was hard for me to get my head around it, and how to take a little step back and you call it get yourself together,
Yeah.
or a managed headspace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me how you came up
Well,
with that.
yeah, I mean, so my first day in, so I had these surgeries to remove a tumor that I had, and then they had to wait a couple of weeks for me to start chemo for that to heal and
Mhm.
the whole nine yards. So I go in that first morning, you get there at 6 a.m. and you're mentally, at least for me, I thought I was mentally prepared,
Yeah.
and so they, well, we don't have a room, and that was where it started. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
okay, right. And of course, you're ready to get to it at that point. So finally, get me a room, get up there, and I'm like, okay, let's get started. And they're like, well, I don't know if they put the orders in for the chemo yet, right? So there's this whole series of things that needed to happen before I would even start chemo. I didn't know anything
You
about.
didn't, right? They don't tell you that, right?
Yeah. And as the day went on, I got madder and madder and madder. And I finally had a meltdown at the end when
Mhm.
the nurse practitioner came in and said, well, did you do the bone marrow draw yet? I'm like, what are you guys doing? I got
Mhm.
here at 6 a.m. ready to go do my
Right.
chemo. And here it is. So I knew at that point I was flustered. I was aggravated. I was not doing a good job as just managing myself so I could go and help with the process.
Mhm.
So, there's that piece of it in terms of the frustration, the process frustration, but then there's also the piece that on the other side of it, when you're first diagnosed, right? What's the first thing that you do, right? You run to the Google box and
Yeah.
okay, you put in, and then you see all these horrible things. At least for me, I did. It was like
Mhm.
survival rate is low and blah, 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 blah. So I knew that wasn't right. And I also knew how I was working, how I was operating, I guess, as a patient in the hospital wasn't right, but I didn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where I'm just like, okay, look, it's okay to think these things, to be mad, to
Yeah.
be upset, to be scared or whatever, but you can't let yourself soak in it. And once I figured out, it's like, okay, well, you can think the thought, don't get mad at yourself about it and turn it around.
Yeah.
Hey, the survival rate for my cancer is low, but I'm at a great hospital with a bunch of really smart people, and I'm going to work really hard as a patient. So everything will turn out the way it needs to,
Right. Yeah.
or whatever it is. Or the survival rate for my cancer is low, but I'm a sample size of
Mhm.
one, and I'll be in the survivor group, or whatever it is, right?
Sure.
So I think once you can turn that noise down, whether it's process aggravation or just fear,
Mhm.
then the road is clear for you to kind of start working on these other things. But if you don't have that foundation where you can kind of think clearly about things,
Mhm.
it's a long
That's
road.
it is, and that really is about managing your headspace,
Yeah.
getting your mind to a
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of different ways to do that. Um, but in the beginning, it's it, okay. Let's cut out the clutter.
Yeah.
Find
Don't
a
be mad
place.
about it.
Don't be
Don't
mad
don't
about it.
scold yourself about it. It's
No.
okay,
Yeah.
right? It's fine.
Yes.
It's gonna happen, right? But
Yeah.
you can't soak in it. That's not
No.
helpful.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. And yeah, so as you go along, you learn some things, and you learn. Okay, I maybe I need to ask a little more, pointed questions here, and
yeah.
um, and and ask how,
Yeah.
and it took me a while to be comfortable in that space in the
Yeah.
beginning,
Yeah.
which I'm much better at it now. Of
Yeah.
course, I look back, and most people would say, yeah, you should be by now. But in the beginning, it is
Yeah.
challenging. You have these smart people who've been through a lot of schooling, um,
Yeah. They do it
and
every day,
and that's
right?
all. That's their work. That's their
Yeah.
world.
They have
So
500 reps. You have your first
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Right?
So asking or questioning,
Yeah.
not necessarily just asking, but the questioning can be
Yeah.
intimidating at first. It was for
Yeah.
me. How did you
No,
get through
and I
that?
think it was for me, and I think it is for most people, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, but I think part of the problem is I talk to a lot of people is they're afraid that whatever their question is dumb or it's not valid or whatever, right? And I had 4 things in my chemo cocktail. And I asked the nurse, I'm like, well, what are the 4 things and what do they do? She's like, well, I think this one does this. And I'm just like, nope, I'll call the doctor. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a cell phone. And of course she freaked out because that's a bad thing, right? The whole situation with the doctors kind of running the show there. So I just said, look, I'm not doing this until I understand what the hell is going on here.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to have confidence. And if you don't have that confidence yourself to ask those questions, then get somebody to do it for you. But you can't not do it because it's a huge source of stress, right? And it sometimes it's just the littlest things. Can I get a warm blanket? You close the blinds in my room. Can you whatever it is, all those little things. And then, if you start small with those things and then kind of work your way up, you'll feel maybe a little bit more comfortable. But, somebody put it to me that this is your personal Super Bowl. So act like it.
Yes. Right.
Right. Just go let it rip. Right.
Yeah.
You got questions. It's okay. And, so yeah, I think for me, I never really had that compunction. I was just like, okay, I had a question or I wanted something. I raised my hand. And you said something earlier that I thought was genius, right? Learning how to work the system, right? Because the thing about it is everybody knows something, whether it's the PCA, the person that's coming to help keep your room clean, or the nurse, or the pharmacist, or the doctor, or the nurse practitioner, right? So your whole point about working the system, I think, is genius, right? Find out how this whole big monster machine works and use it to your advantage.
Yeah. I think for people like you and I who are in operations, have operations backgrounds where we like to build what works and examine what works, it comes more naturally for us.
For sure.
So, I think this this resource that you've written is just going to be helpful especially for people who don't have that experience.
And most people don't, honestly.
Truthfully,
you're an outlier, right? I mean, yourself. I mean, think of all the things that now. That you walk in day one tomorrow for whatever reason, you're like, okay, I want this, I want this, I want this.
Sure.
Right.
Right. And
like you can do all the medical stuff, but all the rest of it, I got it.
Yeah.
This is what I want, right?
I really liked your chapter that you titled "Studied Indifference."
Yeah.
And what you mean by that. Would you just expound a little bit about what you talk about studied indifference is?
Yeah, I read that phrase somewhere and I'm like, oh, it's genius.
Yeah.
Right. But if you think of it, you go through a whole variety of steps when you're in the hospital, or even if you're just going through outpatient processes, right? And every time they put the IV in, or they put you under for surgery, or they start a radiation treatment or whatever, right? There's this stress that comes with it. And to me, there's 2 realities. One is you had to do it, right? It's not optional, right? If the doctor says you got to do it, you got to do it.
Sorry. You got to do it, right?
Unless you're a doctor and can figure it out on your own, but for 99.99% of the rest of us, you're doing it. And 2 is, it's stressful.
Yeah.
So the question then becomes, how do you take that stress level down as far as you can to where when the process happens, you're not happy about it.
Right.
But you're to the point of indifference, not because you don't care what happens, but you've studied it so much, every possible thing that's supposed to go right, that could go wrong, that could go sideways. You've looked at it from every possible angle. And you're at peace with it because you have to do it.
Right.
If you can get to that point purposefully, to me, that's a win. That's the way to go grind down that stress as low as it possibly can be.
When you've learned what the possible side effects are, how you're going to feel, afterwards.
Yeah.
And when then it happens, well, you know about it now.
Yeah.
You
And if you're smart, you thought about what you're going to do
what
if it
you're going to do,
comes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make sure I can get the rest. I know that my caregiver has the meals in the fridge ready for me to
Right.
reheat,
Right.
or I've got a meal train coming, and
Right.
someone's going to help me out. Um,
Yeah.
Next time I go, I'll be able to ask for this, so I'm prepared next time
Right.
too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a, because I think early on I didn't ask enough questions,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, I mean, it was a kind of a slow burn to get to the point to where I started chemo, right? I had this tumor on my leg. My general doctor's like, well, we're going to send you down to the James. I'm like, okay. I don't, and the James is a cancer hospital for those
Yes,
who,
right.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't, that's not a great idea.
Mhm.
Oh, we're not really sure what this is. And they kept going down this line. So it was a slow burn to get to that kind of starting line. Right.
Mhm.
So I think between there, the first day I walked in for that first biopsy to my first day of chemo, I'd built some skills in this whole area of, asking questions.
Mhm.
Still
Right.
wasn't great,
Yep.
but at least I was better than somebody coming in cold.
Yep. And I just want to point out to our listeners too that you and I we're pretty privileged in the fact of where we lived,
Oh,
and our access to exceptional care.
yeah.
You being just outside of Columbus and being able to take advantage of the university system.
Yeah.
Research hospitals are great for being treated for
Oh, yeah, for
cancers,
sure.
right?
Yep. Yep.
I was first diagnosed. I was in Seattle. We had a great cancer research center called the Fred Hutch
Yeah.
and the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, and so I had the the best people in the
Yeah.
region to help take care of me and to
Yeah.
help take care of you where you
Yeah.
were. And not everybody has that. Not everybody has that resource, and maybe has to travel quite a ways for.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
or maybe their only option is to go to the closest hospital that does have some cancer
Mm-hmm.
treatments, and maybe they don't have the best facilities. Or this book can really help you when maybe you when you're speaking about advocating for yourself, to be able to ask the right questions,
Yeah.
or just keep asking the questions until you
Right.
get
Of
the answer,
course. 100%.
right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. And I
So,
would echo what you say. I mean, I was blessed, you know, if there's any place on the planet
yeah.
to get sick, I mean, I was really lucky. So I was
Mhm.
at the James Cancer Center at Ohio State,
Mhm.
and had a really good experience. But it turned out that one of the experts for my type of cancer was, he was a researcher and a doctor there,
Mhm.
and he knew everybody. He had all manner of resources that came along with his, years of research in my very specific type of cancer. So, they eventually, like, one of the things, he eventually sent a sample of my tumor off to the NIH and said, you need to go parse this a couple levels down to where I've gotten to. And, of course he was right. Super smart guy, but you're right. But I think the lesson is in that, if you're not there, then you have to be aware and smart of where you're at, and then make the determination of, okay, do I really want to go find that person that's the expert, right?
Right.
And I think the answer is yeah. I mean, if you can,
If you can, right?
yeah.
And that's where I say we're a little privileged, because we have the
Oh,
resources
for sure.
ourselves to be able to take care of that. Not everybody does.
Correct.
And I think that again, that's why your book is a
It's
great
tough.
read.
Yep.
To be able to take advantage and work the system wherever you are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I love it. I'm going to steal
Yeah.
that, by the way.
Yeah, of
Work the
course.
system. I'm totally
Absolutely.
stealing
Yeah.
that.
Hey, it is uh, it can be so hard to be tough. and you have a chapter called the toughness response.
Yeah.
You know, why don't you illuminate our listeners a little bit about how uh, getting to that place?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, look, you don't have a choice, right? You just have to see your way through.
Mhm.
But, the whole, tough it out kind of thing is absolutely necessary. But the question then becomes, how do you make it easier?
Mhm.
Right. And again, so a lot of these ideas kind of build on themselves. But if you studied your treatment in a way that you understand all the good and the bad things that could happen, right? What are the bad side effects? What are the complications that could show up? Whatever. You have the opportunity to understand and decide on purpose ahead of time how you're going to respond to both physical and mental challenges.
Yeah.
Right. So it isn't necessarily um, you know, buckle up and just be tougher, right? It's more of an opportunity to provide a more thoughtful response, but to develop it ahead of time. Because
Yes.
when you're in the moment, and I had some complications that were some of them were just awful.
Mhm.
But in that moment, you're not typically able to think clearly, right? And whatever you're going to come up with is probably suboptimal, may get you
Mhm.
through, but there's probably a better way. But if you think of it ahead of time, hey, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And I
Mhm.
have protein shakes in the refrigerator, or I have somebody on standby to talk to if I feel like I'm having a really rough day or whatever it is, right? Then in that moment where you're feeling all that stress and you need that kind of toughness, right? You figured out a process and a way to bring it to help you,
Yeah.
right? Rather than in that moment where you're feeling as low as you can possibly feel, you're trying to then sort out what to do, right? Do
Mhm.
it ahead of time.
Yes. And you know, in my journey, um, I honestly, I could just say that it can be very difficult to be able to um, bring that strength up to that place to get through that day, or even that hour, or that 10 minutes.
100%, 100%
You
agree.
know, and because uh, we both know, and so many people know what it's like to be an inpatient, to do treatments. And there were times when I just needed to get through 10 minutes.
Yeah,
If I could
100%
just
agree. Yeah,
pass through this 10 minutes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes it would just be, okay, I'm going to just look out the window,
yeah,
and I'm going to try to focus on something else.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm
And
gonna count chickens. I'm gonna
check.
watch funny YouTube videos.
Right.
I'm gonna whatever it is, right?
Yep.
But
And
figure out that ahead of time.
right. And that, and what what I learned out of that chapter was that toughness comes in different ways. It comes in
Yeah.
different forms.
Right?
It isn't you know, uh, so something that you have to be made of steel to do. Um,
Right. You can make it easier
yes, right,
if you know what you're gonna do.
yeah,
Right.
so
And
true.
it isn't necessarily,
Yeah,
gritting your teeth. It's just being smart about how you respond
yeah,
to stuff that stresses you
yeah.
out. But you make a super smart point, which I think I want to expand on a little bit. So you had said that like there's times when you just feel like you got to get through the next 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's a genius point, right? Because there's times, at least for me, where I just felt so awful and had really acute pain. I'm just like, look, I just got to get through the next minute,
Mm-hmm. Right,
right? And then you know what? Because it'll put me 1 minute closer to where this stuff will be hopefully
right,
better, right? And I think that's an absolutely genius point that you brought
yeah,
up. I think,
yeah,
and I don't want to lose that. I think
yeah,
it's super smart,
right,
right? Just keep breaking it down into smaller and smaller time buckets until you get to the point to where you're like, okay, I can make a
I,
minute.
right,
I can't make a day right now, the way I
no,
feel, the way I'm thinking, but I
right.
certainly can make a minute or
Sure.
10 minutes.
And that can apply to so many other aspects of life too. You can
Oh, sure.
get through a
Sure.
10-minute chunk
Yeah.
chunk it out, chunk it
Yeah.
out.
Yep.
You determination to get through treatment is
Yeah.
it's again like toughness. It's not always easy to just pull out of your back pocket.
Yeah.
But it is something you need to pull out of your back pocket sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, your little notebook of determination, your little kit of
Right.
determination, your
Right.
little pill bottle of determination,
Whatever it is.
whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Um, and people often, I get this question. I got this question in the beginning too, and I still get it to this day. It's like, how do you keep your attitude? How do you keep your positive attitude? But
Yeah.
I'm relatively positive by nature.
Yeah.
Um, but um, when you write so much about the preparation, um, being tough, how to advocate for yourself, how to manage your mind's headspace,
Yeah.
and then you bring it, you can culminate it with this determination to get through. But your title of your chapter is applied determination. You do have to make it move something or help you move something.
Yeah.
And tell our listeners a little bit about what you mean by applied determination.
Well, so it's kind of like when all else fails,
Mhm.
is probably one way to think of it, where you're just like, you have to, there's times when you just have to decide how you're going to be as a patient,
Mhm.
right? And you're going to have to go and just decide on purpose that you're going to push through or
Right.
whatever it is. Like, that's it. I mean, in a nutshell, if I, the chapter can now be one sentence, but it's like, just decide on purpose that you're going to go and do whatever it is you have to do to get through.
Yep.
Right. And I think that there comes a point in a lot of people's treatment. I guarantee you that you showed up there at one point, probably more than once in the course of all you've been through, where you're just like, why is this happening again? Another complication. I got to go get another scan. I got to go, have another treatment or whatever. And you're just like,
Mhm.
look, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. It's, you just throw your hands up. You're just like,
Right.
whatever. I'm doing it. Let's go.
Let's go.
I think it's easy to say, I'm sitting here on a sunny day and I'm healthy and everything's good. The hardest time to say that is when you're at your bottom and you're tired and you've been picked and prodded and, poked for a week
Hmm.
or whatever it is. And it's just like, you just have to know that moment's coming and you're
Yeah.
going to have to know what are you going to do when that comes. And you're going to have to decide on purpose, hopefully ahead of time,
Yeah.
that you're just going to decide to do whatever it takes to make it through.
Make it through, because that's the goal.
That is the goal. Yeah.
Right, is to make it
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
And it does at certain points, especially it takes a lot of determination.
Yeah.
And you I guess, okay, to our listeners out there, we've got two middle-aged guys here who are talking about this, and we have a lot in common. We need grit and we need determination. And um, the thing is, however you find that for yourself,
Yeah.
whatever your grit is, however you find your determination,
Yeah.
we find it this way and we
Yeah.
explain it this way. But I think
Yeah.
it really is, it, it, it is so important to be able to find that inner strength
Yeah.
to know that you're going to get through this and you do what you have to do it.
Yeah.
And
And what is it that makes you feel that way? Can you
mhm.
watch a video clip that makes you feel that way? Can you listen to a song that makes you feel that way? I mean, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things where you're just looking out. You're saying, "Look, I know this is There's going to be a time. There maybe not be if you're lucky, but there's probably going to be a time where I'm just going to feel like I've had the stuff and beat out of me, and I'm just,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm at
Yeah.
what's end."
I I think this where I want to lead this conversation is next is it really does help to have some faith, and because with some kind of faith, however a person just finds that for themselves, and it can be in so many different ways. Deciding that the situation is kind of bigger than you, and you could use some help from wherever you find it. Can help you with everything that we've talked about already.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for me, that was the chapter that kind of sat the longest.
Sure.
Because I'm very like I don't want to tread on anyone's beliefs. I just don't think that's
of course
the right
not.
way to approach it. I don't want to alienate anyone one way or the other in terms of, hey, this is all about my faith and this is what I'm gonna do, or it's like, well, I just don't believe in it. But I do think that there's opportunity to look at it really from two ways. One is, if you have some kind of spiritual faith, that is a huge support if
Sure
you
is.
want it to be. But you also just have to have faith that everything will work out. So it's kind of this belief that it's like, it'll all come together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those were kind of the two angles that I brought about. And I think for me personally, it was a huge help.
Sure.
And I was, and am at peace with my faith and what I believe and what I don't believe. I think, if you're not there, I think there's a different set of ways that you're going to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But none of it's not wrong. There's no wrong or right when it comes to this, right? So, to whatever extent you think you have a personal spiritual belief that's going to help you, then use it.
Use it.
Whatever it looks like, right?
Yeah. I can relay this story. I was inpatient going through a stem cell transplant.
Yeah.
And I expressed so when you have a stem cell transplant, you're in the hospital 4 to 5 weeks. It's a lot of days.
Yeah.
And our listeners who maybe have been through this will know that you'll get a different rounding doctor every week.
Yeah.
Some with their interns from a different specialty.
Yeah.
So even though I'm going through a blood cancer, transplant, I had a oncologist who specialized in lung cancer one week, and we're talking, and I really felt a connection with this person, and I let them know that I was having trouble emotionally.
Yeah.
And because there wasn't a social worker right away to come by, they suggested the chaplain. And
right.
and at first I kind of put the hairs up on my neck because I was not I didn't lean that way maybe for what I thought a chaplain was.
Yeah.
And then the next day I when they came by rounds, I said, could you get in touch with that chaplain?
Yeah.
And so that the chaplain came by, and non-denominational chaplain, but I mean, a great listener.
Yeah.
And let me just get some things off of my mind I needed to get out of my mind.
Right.
And talk to somebody about.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily going to be my wife.
Yeah.
Who, maybe that would be a hard listen. I didn't want to pile that on my caregiver.
Of course. Yeah. No, I agree. 100%.
So I think whether you have a religious belief, faith like that, or wherever you find your bigger, your higher power.
Yeah.
I can only say from my own experience, it was a great decision that I basically stumbled into. Yeah. And I would recommend that.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things on that. if they send the chaplain in, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Right. Because I had a chaplain visit, and I'm convinced a chaplain in a cancer hospital has to be the best job in the world. Captive audience, you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Tons of people that are more than happy to talk to you, right? I mean, it's just great.
Sure.
It was a huge resource for me as well.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's a great story.
We're both in this place right now, and for any of our listeners, hopefully you'll get to this place too, where you're post treatment.
Yeah.
And you're getting on with things, and you speak about being fearless.
Yeah.
And it can come in many different ways. From my own experience, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about like your journey about being fearless?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're really sick and you are hopefully then healthy, everything that happens to you that you wouldn't give a second thought about before you were in treatment for cancer, all of a sudden can become a federal case in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, I got this pain in my leg. I got, and it's just like my whole, and it was the same thing again, where I was like, I went through it for whatever, a year. Oh, my knee's sore. Oh, I get this, I have a really bad headache today. Whatever it is. And you're just like, oh boy, now I'm getting sick again. And it's just another case of just saying, look, this isn't going to work. It's not productive. It's not helpful. So, I would probably amend it now to say, be intelligently fearless. Right. So in other words, just go do your thing, but be smart about it. So if you have a problem that doesn't seem right in your body, then go show up at your doctor's door and say, here's what's going on.
Sure.
But don't look for reasons to be sick. Because I'm convinced, after talking to, again, a lot of people, there's some people that I don't know the best way to put this. They really they really thrived on all the attention they got when they were sick.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I don't know, I might be sick again. I got to go to the doctor, all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
And everybody piles on, oh, well, you should be okay. And I think at the end of the day, it's just like, look, just go live your life. You're done. Put it behind you. Great lesson. You probably learned a lot. Off you go into life. Right. But don't be stupid about if you feel that things aren't right in your body.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
right.
That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. When people ask me a little bit about that, I remember the first go around, the 18 months of really how intense it was.
Yeah.
Between diagnoses, all the testing, surgeries, biopsies.
Yeah.
Everybody, so many people go through this, and then the treatment, chemotherapy, radiation.
Yeah.
It took me a while to not think about cancer.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right. So it took me about almost a year. And I remember I was driving in my car, and it was a sunny day like today is here in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's great.
And I said, oh, I didn't think about cancer yesterday.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it, and then I thought, oh, I didn't think about it yesterday. And it was such a milestone for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying my journey is going to, because we know everybody's journey is so
Totally
different. Right?
Yeah.
You
100%.
are an individual.
Yep.
So I never want to say my journey is going to be your journey. But I did get to a place where I was able to be more fearless.
Yeah.
And it took a little while, but I got there.
Yeah.
And I think that if you work the system, if you think about the things that you've written in this book, you'll get there. You'll have a better chance of getting there too.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you decide on purpose to get there on purpose.
Yes.
you might be able to get there faster.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's for me. But you think of it, you come out of and you had a hugely serious, bout in the hospital. But it's like, okay, they discharge you, and then 2 days later they're going to see you, and then 2 days after that they're going to see you, and then it's like, well, you're doing better. How about a week at a time, and then a month at a time, and then every 3 months. So, for me, I just got released. When was it? Probably a year ago or 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I want to say, where they're just like, get out, you're fine.
Get out, you're fine. Yeah.
But you have, and my brother-in-law made this statement. He's like, people live, I don't know if in fear, but certainly have concern that when they have that annual checkup or the 3-month checkup or 6-month checkup, and it's just like, you just got to let it go.
I think that is great advice, because I do the same now, and I go in thinking,
whatever.
Yeah. They're not going to find
fine.
anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's talk about this. Is serious but enjoyable conversation.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate getting to know you a little bit.
I agree.
So right, this is the Chemo Kitchen podcast.
Yes.
So we're getting to wrap it up here, but
yeah,
we always like to talk a little bit about food. We have our cookbook out, and how nutrition is so important. Agreed. And you and I both have a distaste for hospital food, and so in the back of your book, you've got some fun recipes.
Yeah.
And soup is one thing that you talked about a few different times in the book.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you like, what you like to eat.
So for me, one of the greatest days I ever had in the hospital was when someone said, you could bring your own food in. We'll leave it in the fridge by the nurse's station. We'll heat it up for you.
Yeah.
Huh. Game changer.
It was.
Right. Because then you're eating hospital food, which, okay, they try, but it's really hard, right? I get it.
Oh, sure.
But then it was just like, my mother-in-law's making me tortellini soup. My wife's making me beef barley soup. And, it's just a huge breakthrough. And I think, and I never really thought about it. And then, when you guys started putting together this Chemo Kitchen cookbook, I'm like, oh, that's genius. And here's why. I remember at one point when I was probably as low as I ever was in the hospital, when nurse walked in my room with a cup of Coke. She's like, I'm sitting here until you're done drinking this. You need to get some calories in your body. I don't care what it is. I know Coke is garbage, but you're drinking this. And I'm like, oh, right. So you take that out to its logical end, right? And what you guys are doing with the Chemo Kitchen, I think is huge, because you have to eat to get better.
You really do.
You have to eat, hopefully healthy, to get better. But if you can't eat healthy for whatever reason, just get some calories in you to start.
That's right.
And then as you're normally, you kind of normalize your diet, then you have these different options. And what you know and what I know, and I would bet a lot of other people know now after COVID, is that, stuff doesn't taste the same. And you have the same experience with COVID, right? Where you just like, I can't taste anything, right? Or it tastes funny, something you love, your favorite dish, and you're like, oh, it tastes funny, right? So that's why for you having these different recipes that were made on purpose for chemo patients is huge.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a huge service, and I think it's a great path forward. I mean, I tried to do the same type of thing in my kind of dumb way, and just saying, look, if you're going to make cookies and you like cookies that, you might need to add more salt because after the chemo, I couldn't taste the salt, or, put in more pepper, or whatever it is. Right. But I think you guys are taking it probably 5 steps further to be able to do that. But yeah, for me, once I figured out I could bring food into the hospital,
right,
let's go.
Game changer. Changer.
I know. Best day I ever had in the hospital. No question about it.
Yeah. So our listeners, there's a bonus in the back of Jeff's book. He's got soup and ice cream recipes. Or that he likes himself, and so again, it is How to Be a Cancer Patient with Jeff Boothman. Jeff, it's been a pleasure, a real pleasure.
Well. Yeah. And thanks for what you're doing. Look, it's important. I think the chemo kitchen, I just said, and I'd say it if we weren't on a podcast, I think it's a genius idea, but I also appreciate the way that you're helping to advocate for patients. So thanks for what you do, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here.
All right. Fantastic. We'll talk again sometime.
Yeah, I'm all
All right.
for it. So
Right on,
thank you.
Jeff.
All right.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye-bye.